Oh, yeah, first time we were here, yes, yes. Yes. It's taking that long? Wow. Okay. April. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
You can't stay on 59 forever. Good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 p.m. Would you please stand? And I'd like to be the first to welcome you to the 143rd year version of the council chambers. It hasn't changed for 142 years. It's now a bit different, and we're glad to have you with us. Would you join me in the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilor Mataronis.
I'd like to take a moment of silence for Cole Walker. I think he was a good citizen of the town. I think we've all eaten his corn, so he passed away a couple of weeks ago. So let's have a moment of silence for Cole Walker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now open the public hearing. We're going to do a series of public hearings on several ordinance proposals. The first of these are the amendments to Chapter 14. Chapter 14 of the town ordinances is the zoning chapter, and it has perhaps the most detail of the things we'll be considering this evening. There are several sections of Chapter 14 that are requiring change as a result of the decision of the legislature to mandate that take effect on the 1st of January 2024. Hence the unusual urgency in our moving forward with something that, as you I'm sure have recognized, is very detailed and has far-reaching impacts. I'll ask the solicitor to review for us what it is that those changes do.
Okay, the first matter on the agenda is an amendment to Chapter 14-2.7, land non-conforming by area. Previously, your zoning ordinance had some deviations in subsection B, the substandard lots of record. That was 15% of the lot width measured at the front yard. Front yard would be 15% of the average depth of the lot, but no less than 30 feet. The rear yard depth, 15%, but no less than 15 feet in depth. The proposal you have before you eliminates those provisions because they do not conform to the law that was passed by the General Assembly. In its place, in subsection 4, it reads, the setback, frontage, and/or lot width requirements of the zoning district in which the lot is located shall be reduced, and the maximum building coverage requirements shall be increased by the same proportion as the lot area of the substandard lot, is to the minimum lot area requirement of the zoning district in which the lot is located. All proposals exceeding such reduced requirement shall proceed with a modification request or a dimensional variance, whichever is applicable. In your residential zone, you have one minimum lot size, which is 2 acres. I refer to it as R80. So if you have a substandard lot of record, to the extent that the lot is smaller than that, whatever percentage that is the relief that you automatically get from your setbacks. So the setbacks in the residential zone, minimum depth to the front yard, 50 feet. Minimum rear yard depth, 25 feet. Minimum side yard is again 25 feet. And the statute mentions maximum lot coverage. That's 10% in the residential zone. So if one of your residents has a 40,000 square foot lot, the front yard setback reduces from 50 feet to 25 feet because it's half the size of what it should be. The side yard and the rear yard depth goes from 25 feet to 12.5 feet. Lot coverage increases to 20%. Now, I can give you some other examples. Well, here's the thing. I was trying to figure out like 15,000 square feet and everything. I think I did okay, but you get the idea on this. Unfortunately, the law is mandatory. It needs to change. And the question always comes up, what happens if the local community doesn't change it? The state law controls, and I think this is something that you're pretty much mandated to do. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the public? If there are, I would ask that you come up and speak to the microphone here so that we can record that. Thank you. Please identify yourself with name and street address.
Bill Smith, is there any minimum that you have, or can you, if you had a 5,000 square foot lot, would you be able to be 6 feet off of the front yard? Like, I know Tiverton has the same wording that you're talking about now, but they actually have some minimums that they maintain, like we had done previously. Does that go away too?
That does, yes.
Oh,
It
thank you.
does.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I had mentioned this, TAC Eddie, I had mentioned this earlier in October notes to you. What about the business zone?
It applies to the business zone also. I'm using that as an example because it's actually, frankly, it's easier. But your minimum lot area in section 14-4.1 for the business zone, there is no minimum lot size.
Right.
So I'm not so sure that this applies there because you don't have that provision. So my advice to the zoning board would be in this instance that the amendment does not apply to the business zone because you don't have a minimum lot size. You could have any size in the business zone.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's a good question, by the way.
Any other questions on that particular section?
May I follow up to Mr. Smith's question?
Sure.
For the solicitor? Are we not allowed to put a minimum in there?
That's correct, yes.
So with the new state law, we wouldn't be allowed to put that in there.
It would be null and void. If I may, just, I think it's appropriate, because there's discrete provisions in the zoning ordinance, that as we go through each one, once public comment is over and once council deliberations are over, vote on that particular provision.
In accordance with our section, our zoning.
Correct, yes.
Chapter section.
And this only conforms to land, not conforming by area. This doesn't, someone can't take a 2-acre lot, decide to chop it up into little pieces and apply this standard to it.
This is for substandard original lots of record. For the subdivision, even with the provisions that will be addressed, this is something that we've been talking to the planning board about. We were there on Tuesday. you can't create a non-conforming lot. This is for lots that are what are known as substandard original lots of record, meaning that they were lawful at the time they were created.
They're all existing.
Correct, yes.
So any new, I'm just doing this for public information as well. Any new subdivision has to be a 2-acre lot.
That's correct, yes.
So what you're saying, Tony, you want us to vote on section 14-5 after we get through with it, or just that section you just?
This is 14-2.7.
Correct, yes.
And what
In this
I'm asking,
particular case.
does he want us to vote on that? And
On
then we'll go-
accepting the recommendations that are before us. These recommendations are deletions and additions. And when it's finished, the new 14-2.7 will look like this with those incorporated.
But what I'm asking, he just said his recommendation is to vote on everything separately, unless I misunderstood you.
No.
No,
That's-
but once the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
Correct, but what I do is close the public hearing for this section,
Right.
then vote.
You see-
Keep the public hearing
For
open
this
for the
whole
rest of it.
14, whatever it is here, 14 dash,
So
1, 2, 14 dash,
Correct.
right, okay. I didn't know whether you just wanted to vote on what you just said, or this whole section 14.
No,
No.
just on each section that we're addressing.
Okay.
There
Thank
being no
you.
more public or council comments on section 14-2.7, we'll close the public hearing. For that section, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the changes as described.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll then open the public hearing for section 14-5.5. Solicitor.
Okay, and you have in your I should say that you have in your packet the recommendation from the planning board. That's something that they're required to do by statute whenever the zoning ordinance is amended. And your current accessory dwelling unit section is section 14-5.5. And the definition there of an accessory dwelling unit is a unit in a primary dwelling, a detached unit, or a unit in an accessory structure. The ordinance now has a minimum of 3 acres for an accessory dwelling unit. The state statute sets the minimum, however, now at 20,000 square feet for the lot size. The planning board recommends that the phrase, as defined in the subdivision regulations, be added, and the following phrase, adequate water supply, be included after that. And the reference to individual sewage disposal system be replaced with on-site wastewater treatment system. The reason for these two things is the planning board was concerned about whether or not a lot would have the ability to support an accessory dwelling unit that was attached or otherwise. So they wanted to make sure that adequate water supply was a requirement for this, to make sure that there was potable water for an accessory dwelling unit. The second thing is it was pointed out that the Department of Business Regulation no longer uses individual sewage disposal system. That's been replaced with on-site wastewater treatment system. That's an appropriate change for this, because that's the nomenclature that the DEM uses. Now, the planning board additionally recommended that the literal application of accessory dwelling units legislation is not in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And the current provisions in the zoning ordinance relating to accessory dwelling units be deleted in its entirety. The reason that they say that is because the way that the law is structured is that it says that if a town has accessory dwelling unit provisions, this is what they must be, which is included in the ordinance. However, if there are no accessory dwelling unit provisions, then these state law provisions don't apply. So what the planning board's recommendation is, and actually what I think the town council has to do in the first instance, is make that policy decision as to whether or not accessory dwelling units should be allowed in the town. Because if you do, they're by right in any lot that's over 20,000 square feet. That's the first thing. The second thing is you cannot limit accessory dwelling units under the new law to family members. Now, I use the term accessory dwelling units. It used to be called an in-law apartment because there'd be restrictions that it would have to be for family. You can't do that anymore. You can't make restrictions on limiting it to family or just limiting it to elderly or things of that nature. You can't do that. The other thing that the provision that you have before you for the amendment allows for accessory dwelling units to be in a detached dwelling. So you can have the existing family house, and then you can have an accessory dwelling unit by right, not only in a garage, but also in a structure that can be built for accessory dwelling units. So it's a choice. If you have accessory dwelling units, has to be over 20,000 square feet by right, not by special use permit or anything else. And also they can be detached, it can be in a garage, or it can be in the dwelling unit itself.
And it need not be for a family member.
You can't restrict it to family members.
Can you restrict it to residents? People who live in town?
No,
So we could basically be building housing for people from out of town to move in?
that's correct, yes.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about the implications of people building these for the intention of renting them out short term. Would we be able to restrict that?
No. I'm being honest, no.
So,
You made reference to the fact that it was your intention that perhaps we should have done something with the first section? Did I understand that correctly?
No, you have these are your choice, you actually have a choice tonight. The choice is, first to decide whether or not you want accessory dwelling units. If you say no, then what you do is the motion would be to strike the provisions of section 14-5.5 from the town ordinance. If you do, then you would not have to comply with the state statute. If you decide to have accessory dwelling units, the language that you have, that is what you would have to adopt, because the language in the state statute is mandatory. And I will say, this is a discussion we had at the planning board and even the zoning board. There was a movement to amend this statute, which was not successful. It didn't get all the way through the General Assembly. It made some steps, but not all of them. So the issue is whether or not there'll be changes in the upcoming General Assembly. Some communities have said, well, we're not going to have, we're going to remove our ADU provisions to see what the General Assembly does. We can always reenact it based on the new statute.
Yes.
Of course, you never know what's going to happen. It might get through the General Assembly, it might not. But you know, that's something that other communities have done. This is where the idea comes from, not to have your ADU.
And to say it another way, it might come, but it might come in July of next year as the General Assembly goes out the door. Meanwhile, for 6 months, we're without that or with it, depending upon our decision.
That's
So
correct.
we are obligated to act by the 1st of January. They have sent a signal that they intend to revisit it, and the likelihood is that changes might come, which would then have us cycle back through and change what we just finished changing. But nonetheless, I think we need to act in a way that's protective. I have not asked the public for comment, and I want to do that unless there's something that
okay.
So are there public comments with respect to this question of accessory dwelling units? Yes, sir.
Jeff Manning, Shaw Road. I got to say the council chambers smell pretty nice tonight. So, this is a deeply flawed law from the General Assembly. It takes a one-size-fits-all approach to all 39 municipalities. It doesn't matter if you have well water like we do in our town, public water, septic versus sewer. We're being given the same restrictions on what we can do as someone in Narragansett, Central Falls, Hopkinton, and it makes zero sense. We're going from being able to have an accessory family dwelling unit on 2 acres, an accessory apartment on 3 acres, Now we can do whatever we want on less than half an acre. In fact, it's like 4/10 of an acre. And with no affordability mandate to that, there's nothing to preclude someone with a substandard lot of record, especially in the coastal zones, to build an accessory house on a 20,000 square foot lot, flip that thing to Councilor Golembeski's point. They could be from out of town. They can use it as a short-term rental. They can use it as a guest house. All that does is increase our density without doing anything about affordability. It strains our resources, and I think we need to protect the family members of this town, but this law does nothing to do that. And I think what we need to do is petition the General Assembly, Senator Palma and Representative McGaugh, and we have to get a voice, whether it's partnering with other rural locales that are similar in population and density. But until such time, personally, I see no way around it other than to strike accessory dwelling units right now, because without it, we have no idea how many can be built. We have how many lots in town would be eligible for these 2 houses per lot, and it could be a complete disaster unless studies are done. And I feel like this is a horrible law from the state, and it was rushed through, and it applies one standard when there's many different standards and needs across the state. So I just encourage the town council to follow the planning board's recommendation until such time that we can get a common sense law that makes sense for the families and the people of Little Compton. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Yes, ma'am.
Lindsay Pinio, Long Highway, Little Compton. I am strongly opposed to the accessory dwelling units, and I would hope that that would be struck from the options. We need to seriously consider the situation of a coastal community in terms of its aquifer, in terms of its fresh water and lack of salinity, in terms of its ability to handle effluent on individual properties. And it's very important that we reflect on perhaps the errors that other agricultural communities, such as Portsmouth and Middletown, and even at one time, Barrington, which had many farms, did not think about that and went along with contractors who were looking to build on high density kinds of plats and whatnot. And this is coming very close to that. And the next thing that happens, as it happened when we lived in Barrington for a short period of time after being married, is we had our own well, we had our own septic system, and all of a sudden the contractors in Barrington voted strongly to have townwide septic processing. And now what one sees when one goes to Barrington, unless you are privileged to live out on Nayat Point or Rumstick Point, is an extremely dense population of plat after plat after plat. And those people who are able to afford an opportunity to leave that area, other than when their children are going to school there, are then moving and looking to exit towards New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. In my opinion, we have a winter house here, and we have a summer house here when we put the screens on. And I really, really think we are the last of Rhode Island communities that has managed to protect this up to this point. And I have very strong feelings about these accessory dwelling units ever coming into this town. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Barbara Passmore, West Road. I'm asking the council to not ban accessory dwellings. To do so, it is going to make some of the elderly, of which I am very much part of, have to leave their town and their home for safety reasons. I would ask you to allow accessory dwellings for family members. I do not think accessory dwellings are feasible for our town for rental, but for families, I'm asking you to allow accessory dwellings for the safety of the individual, most of all, and so that they could stay in their town and in their own home surroundings. So I'm asking you to please consider looking at allowing these accessory dwellings within reason. I understand. I don't want our community to look like some of the things that it's looking now, but think about us who are going to need to go to accessory living somewhere and allow us to stay home and give us our accessory dwellings within a reasonable situation, not for rentals, but for family members. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Amanda Nickerson Toasty, 253 West Main Road. As a real estate broker and also as a new mom with a 17-month-old, the thought of not being able to build an apartment above my 968 square foot built in 1960 barn is sad. It saddens me. It's following up to what Miss Bobby said, who is my neighbor. If her daughters were to call me tomorrow and say, okay, we need to move mom out of her 4-bedroom box colonial that she's lived in for decades into a unit in town, there's nothing for her. There is no single level living, no accessory dwelling permitted on her property, which she meets more than the minimum requirement of the 20,000 square feet. My home is also on a substandard lot. I have 0.9 acres. My house was built in 1840. By us striking this and not having a backup plan or something in place of what we would do, we are not only hurting our seniors that live here, we are hurting our brothers, sisters, parents, nieces, nephews, and children from being able to stay in town. I also have family members that have an accessory dwelling unit and it's occupied by family, and it's been whatever family member has needed a place to live, we have housing for them. So I think we really need to look at what a game plan would be, because striking these but yet grandfathering everything that's already here is a problem. So if we had a backup plan, that would be great, but I can tell you from experience that we have a housing crisis here, and this will just make it worse. This would have real detrimental effects moving forward to what the profile of our town looks like. We go to playgroup at the community center. There were 2 other kids there today out of the whole entire town, 3 of us. So I'm watching our town wither and die, and not being able to find housing for my clients, my friends, and my family makes me really consider whether I would want to stay in this community or if I would want to pack up and head somewhere else that might be a little bit more friendly to families and also our seniors.
Sue?
Good evening. Sue Boddington. I live at One Town Way. I think all of you know that Little Compton has pretty close to the highest priced housing in the entire state of Rhode Island, has the least affordable housing in the entire state of Rhode Island. And because of the cost of land in this town, although there are a number of us who are trying to create some affordable housing, there will not be a lot of affordable housing created because the price of land is just too high to make it affordable. So while that's going on, accessible units are really critical to providing an affordable option to families, to our seniors who have no other options in this town. And to eliminate the ordinance altogether means that, you know, folks are just not going to have that as a choice. I think the ordinance protects the town because if you're required to have adequate water, you're required to have adequate and approved septic systems, wastewater systems as it's been redefined. DEM would be approving those. There are controls on what's built and its impact on the lots that are there, but it's really critical that there be some option for families to have family members, for our seniors to have a place to go when they can no longer maintain and stay in their home, and for families with children, because our school system is just losing children every year and is not going to be viable unless we have some option for families to live in this town. So I hope that you maintain the ordinance that we have and adopt the state requirements, and those may be modified, in which case we can then, you know, the town can then modify the requirements in 6 months when that happens. But I would ask you to keep the ordinance in effect. Thank you.
The line I see us walking in response to these last three speakers who eloquently have laid out that condition, the problem that I see is we are told if you have in your ordinance a family restriction, then your ordinance itself is not in compliance with state law.
That's correct.
At the same time, that law does not speak to existing accessory dwelling units. So perhaps an intermediate step is to remove the ability to create an accessory dwelling unit while explicitly including in that motion the fact that the town petitioned the state, first of all, to reverse what they've done, and secondly, to make clear that it is our, well, I don't know that we need to make it clear to the state. We certainly need to make it clear to the town that our intention is not to, quote, outlaw accessory family dwelling units. As I understand it, the only constraint we're under at this point is that we may not have an ordinance that permits building new ones.
Correct. If there is a lawfully existing accessory dwelling unit, even if the ordinance changes to eliminate future ones, the others are grandfathered in.
May I, sir? I take a little bit of exception. For one thing, we're all talking about affordable housing, which is what we're looking for. This law does not say affordable housing anywhere in it. Matter of fact, I think 14.5, where it says to maintain affordable housing, is a misnomer. It's to maintain accessory housing or whatever the phrase is. That's one of the things I think that the state law messed up on. They didn't make it affordable. So someone could literally build a pool house, put the bunk room upstairs, and rent it out for an Airbnb, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Locke, and I live at the end of Quicksand Pond Road, and every time I come to these meetings, I promise myself I won't speak. And
Yes,
once,
sir. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
and once again, I'm violating that promise. You didn't speak last night, Jim. I didn't speak last night. This is a hard problem, and anybody who doesn't think this is a hard problem is fooling themselves. This is a difficult problem.
I have two questions actually for the solicitor. If we get rid of the current town policy, so that the state can't change it, anybody in the town after January 1st could put up anything they want anywhere. We don't have a policy after July 1st. As I understand it, you could put up an accessory dwelling unit anywhere until the state gives us a new policy, because after January 1st, we won't have a policy.
The law that was enacted basically gave towns the option. If you are to have accessory dwelling units, this is what the law your ordinance has to look like. However, if you don't allow accessory dwelling units, then they're not permitted. It's not a permitted use.
So after January 1st, nobody could put up an accessory dwelling unit until the state does something.
If the town council voted tonight to eliminate the existing provisions for accessory dwelling units, you're correct. After January 1st, a new accessory dwelling unit could not be permitted in town.
So
I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in here. What would stop it?
It's just not a permitted use.
We can't make a permitted use or not a permitted use. It removes the law.
Once the state statute, actually, to me, it's an option. And the town's option is, you can have accessory dwelling units, but you can't restrict it to family only, and you have to permit it by right if the lot is over 20,000 square feet. Or you can say, we're not going to permit accessory dwelling units.
period.
That's the option, period.
So let me ask the audience, what are the chances of the state of Rhode Island will do something promptly and reasonably in the next few months to solve this problem?
Were you here when the rumble strips were removed?
I'm just asking, okay?
It is possible, sir. I understand your point. It is possible, however, and I think we have to do whatever it is to make the case that this law is grievously in error for our town.
So the next question that I have, and I said I only had two, but now I have three. How hard would it be if we accept the law that the state is jamming down our throat? How hard would it be to change it in July when the state makes it better?
You'd follow the same process. The town council would propose an ordinance amendment. It would be sent to the planning board for a recommendation, and then at the next council meeting, the town council would have a public hearing.
So what we're looking at actually is a period of unknown time where either we have no accessory dwelling units in town, or we have accessory dwelling units in town that follow the state regulations until we change it. Those are our two options.
Not to draw too fine a point, you said we have no accessory dwelling units.
No new ones.
We have no new ones.
Excellent point. I hate it when he's right.
So do I.
You must hate coming to the meetings a lot.
And then my last question is, how hard would it be to significantly discourage short-term rentals on accessory dwelling units in this town?
Okay.
We can't abolish them, but how hard would it be to significantly discourage them?
Okay.
And now I sit down.
Did you want me to answer?
Yes.
Okay.
But to the, not to
My advice with short-term rentals is not to put them in the zoning ordinance. If you're gonna regulate short-term rentals, the gentleman is correct, by the way, you can't be in them by state law. My advice is not to put the provisions in the zoning ordinance, but rather to put them in your town code. More flexibility, there's more things you can do. Those towns that have followed that route have been successful in court. So that'd be my advice.
So what you're saying is we could put in requirements in a different part of the, or different part of the ordinance on short-term rentals that doesn't allow them on accessory dwelling units?
The speaker kept asking how hard that is. That would be the hard part, and that would lead to a lawsuit. I can't predict what would happen with that lawsuit, but there'd be some difficulties. But is it impossible? No.
Yes. Sorry.
Good evening. Bill McIntosh, Wardell Lane. Been a lot of really good comments tonight. A lot that I wanted to make that I no longer have to make. But it seems to be we're getting to the crux of the problem. And if you go down to section 5 of 14.5-5, it says, any existing principal resident and accessory dwelling unit shall comply with all requirements of the Rhode Island State Building Code, the Rhode Island Housing Maintenance and Occupancy Code, and other federal, state, and local codes, ordinances, and regulations, and all other applicable provisions of this chapter. And I think after the last speaker, that's basically where we are. We're either gonna do something to allow young people to stay in town who want to stay in town by allowing their parents to build affordable auxiliary dwellings on small lots, or we're not. And I think a lot of us are intrigued with the idea, but we haven't reached that magic moment where we've decided it can work. If you read this language, the local codes, ordinances, regulations, we have a lot of codes and regulations that haven't been addressed. You know, you have a 100-foot setback from water, ponds. A lot of houses don't meet that code in town to this day. So how are they can't put in dwellings, I assume. You have 100-foot setbacks from wells to septic systems. What happens if two neighbors want to add additional dwellings, but it puts septic and wells within that 100-foot limit? Who's going to get to build first? Who gets to, you know, there are a lot of questions that have to be answered. It's going to take a lot of work, but I'd hate to see this idea go away. Auxiliary dwellings can do a lot of help a lot of families. You know, people with big lots don't have to worry. 2 acres, give it to their children, fine. But if you have a small lot and you have 4 or 5 family members, you can't build 4 or 5, but you can help one family stay in town by building an auxiliary unit, either attaching it to your house or your garage or whatever. So what direction are we going to go in? Are we going to double the houses along the shore, as Paul mentioned? Are they going to be all Airbnbs and block our views? Or are we going to allow families with young children to stay in town, who want to stay in town, who work in town? If you look at all the businesses in town, all those kids went to the same school system, right down the road. They've all started business. They employ most of the people who are childbearing age right now. And those people can't live in town. They all have to commute to come to work in a place that they grew up. That has to end. We have to give these kids a place to stay, a place to live. There aren't enough affordable houses for rent. We can't build them fast enough. But if parents can help their children, and this is one way of doing it, then, you know, I'm certainly not going to stand in their way. I'm all for it. We just have to figure out how to do it responsibly and have the people who need it get first in line. You know, we can't double the population and have them only live in town for 6 weeks in the summer. That doesn't work. It doesn't help any of the businesses in town. You know, I'm talking about kids in the school system. I'm talking about people who want to live and stay in this town. How can we help them? This to me is one of the best things that's come up in my lifetime in town that can help this town. And so I hate to see it shut down because we can't figure it out tonight. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, and God bless. You know, I hope you can do it.
Thank you. I would agree with what you have said to the point where, but what we're faced with is a sword of Damocles that's hanging over us that says, if you don't do this, then you will permit all, you will remove the family restriction, and you will insist that all accessory dwelling units on all sorts of sizes of properties can be made, to which we would then reply, but there's not water, or the sewer, the two sewage disposal systems are too close to each other, all those sorts of reasons. But those are going to be incremental with each one. It seems to me that it behooves us to act in a way that says, all right, if we don't have such a thing in our ordinance, you can't tell us what to do, and then work with the state, acknowledging that it was they who passed this. So I don't hold great hope that they'll change their mind, but at least if they don't, we can work what you're talking about. Now, I acknowledge the difficulty with that approach is during the time that we're working on it, we've abolished accessory dwelling unit construction in the town. So all of those of you who had one in mind, that would be put on hold. But I don't think it would cause us a sudden reduction in available houses, because none would be outlawed, I'll say it that way. And it seems to me that's a better approach than to leave it there and have people come along and say, since I have an acre lot and you can no longer restrict me from doing so, I'm going to put up an I'm going to put up an accessory dwelling unit, and when I'm finished, I'll go back to San Diego and I'll lease both of them out during the time that I'm gone. Now, I may be overdrawing that analogy, but that's where I see us. We've got to do something to stop what appears to me to be faulty legislation from driving our town ordinances, and then we have to turn around and keep working at changing that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Andy Rhyme, 40 Paget Brook Road. I have a question as well for the solicitor, and this is just for my information as a homeowner association president. Let's say that the council was to keep the accessory dwelling unit provision in place. How does that impact deed restricted properties that state explicitly single family homes? Because I have 51 people that are going to want to know the answer to that question.
You know, I anticipated the question. So I have to just check right here with what is on my
notes.
Yes, actually, this is the state statute, it's section 45-24-74. Applications for ADUs that are not part of a larger development shall be reviewed through an administrative officer. That's not it. I believe there's language in here that says that private deed restrictions that would not permit ADUs are considered null and void. Give me some time and I'll get the answer for you. Whoop. Private restrictions on ADUs imposed by condominium associations, homeowner associations, or similar residential property governing bodies which conflict with the provisions of this section, or the definition of an ADU as set forth in 45-24-31, shall be void as against public policy.
So deed restrictions don't apply anymore. They'll be eliminated, essentially. That area of our deed restriction would be eliminated.
Yeah, that's not in the ordinance.
Right.
But that's something
that's in state law.
That's something you need to know in the state law.
Right. That's why I'm asking, because people are going to have a lot of questions about their. Yeah. They're going to have a lot of questions about that.
That's something you want to talk to your legislators about.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And a follow-up. I think to me the biggest issue with this really is with the reality of our housing crisis that we have, but also the reality that most of the people that could afford to slap a accessory dwelling unit up fairly quickly are going to use those for short-term rentals probably in this town. There's been an explosion of short-term rentals in this town. The town council had an opportunity to do something about that earlier this year and decided not to, right? There's a real problem with short-term rentals eliminating rental houses, right? We had somebody say that there was only 6% or something like that were short-term rentals. That takes a significant portion of long-term rental properties off the market, short-term rentals do. And so I would really encourage the town council to get back into that and deal with the short-term rental problem, right? And regulate that heavily. And you can do it by distance from each other, there's lots of ways you can really restrict the number of short-term rentals in town. So it wouldn't be a problem with accessory dwelling units. So you wouldn't have a problem with accessory dwelling units becoming short-term rentals because you would eliminate them from being that. So you can do it through zoning. You could create multiple residential zoning districts and allow short-term rentals in certain zones and not others. You can do it from distance from short-term rentals. You can say they can't be within a certain distance from each other. Lots of things you can do. You have lots of options, but you've chosen to do nothing. And I think that's why you're sitting in this position of thinking about having to destroy the ability for people to erect an accessory dwelling unit to allow some affordability, or deal with the fact that most of them that are going to be put up are going to be short-term rentals probably in Little Compton in the near term until something's dealt with it, because there's so much money to be made with a piece of property near the coast. Thank you.
Unless, of course, they're not allowed to be built.
Bill Smith, Highland Avenue, Little Compton. Just a couple questions for the solicitor. Did I understand that the accessory dwelling units could be applied towards our affordable housing goals if they meet certain criteria?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And
But that's not part of the ordinance, that's separate and outside.
okay. I kind of like the way the accessory dwelling unit code is now. I think the state act is a little bit tough for Little Compton, but is there a way that we could do this as a moratorium as opposed to completely eliminate that whole section from the code, so that it's, you know, once it goes away, it's hard to get it back. If it's kind of put in this hold pattern, then it still allows us to have that in the books, and we can address it that way. I'm not very eloquent about this because I'm really not exactly sure how that would work, but
This provision is not eligible for moratorium.
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Maureen Rigo, 16K Mullen Hill Road. There's a part of this that says shall be provided with a safe and adequate water supply. We built our house in 1993. Since then, I have gone deeper with a well. We have fracked it. We have changed water pumps. We have put in, before, we've had a divining rod person come to find a different location. I'd like to know how you define safe and adequate water supply. I come from an area of town, from what I understand, I also have a brother-in-law who is an artesian well driller. So, you know, I'm constantly picking his brain about how did we end up with such a bad water supply? We also have a big family. But there's an old adage that says, you know the value of water when your well is dry. I can't tell you how many times we have run out of water at the most inopportune time. Thanksgiving, Christmas, when the house is full again. It's a problem. And I live down a laneway where there's a chance for people to be putting accessory dwellings, you know, on pieces of property. And I know for a fact that parts of Pequahawk have poor water supply. So I'd like to know what the adequate water supply means. Does that mean when a well gets drilled or not fracked, but pounded, that it's producing 7 gallons a minute? Is that what goes by adequate water supply? If there's anyone that can speak to the committee about what that means in a town that depends on water. This summer, we've had to go to my son has a piece of land over in Westport now with a well, and we've had to fill up containers of water to put into our well. And, you know, as a it's just so inconvenient. When we are dumping water into our well, my washing machine is plugging up, our shower heads are plugging up with silt, and because it creates a disruption in the well itself. And, you know, I hear both sides of the story too. I would love to see more families be able to afford the town. But I also think that we should be very careful to understand really our water preciousness because we all depend on it. And when you're living without water, it's not easy. So if you could just maybe shed some light on what that means, adequate water supply.
That language was at the suggestion of the planning board. I can tell you that when the planning board considered this, there was extensive discussion on that. The result of that discussion, because this is an issue, how do you exactly define adequate water supply? The feeling was that couldn't be done at that meeting. There would have to be consultation with engineers on the matter, and that a definition of adequate water supply and what that means would be included in the town's subdivision regulations. Those are up for amendment in January, and I expect that there would be a definition of that. It would go by how many gallons per minute that you get on there. That would be included in that, and it'd be a scientific basis. Perhaps what you should do is, when the planning board is going to be considering that at their January meeting, you should attend to discuss it with them. I understand they'll have some engineers there, or at least an engineer there to discuss that.
So when an artesian well is pounding, he's looking for bedrock, or is that right? And in a big development, you can be reaching bedrock in the same areas throughout the development. And then it's affecting everyone's water supply. That's the way it goes. So I have one well that is over 550 feet that's not producing anything. And I have another well that's only 130 feet, and I'm getting half a gallon a minute, which is not enough, so.
Understood.
Yeah.
I think
Thank
they'll
you.
be discussing it, and
Thank
they
you.
have more expertise than I do, certainly.
I have a little water expert in this room standing up. You want to say something? Well, I don't want to take the conversation off topic, but I'd be happy to. A quick water statement? Take a couple of minutes and give you a water statement. If I get to ask a question of the solicitor at the same time.
Oh, my God.
My name's Don McNaughton. I live on West Main Road. I happen to be the chair of the Conservation Commission. Many of you may know that we've spent the last 5 years studying our water situation in town. To make a long story at least somewhat short, under 95% of the town lies bedrock. And the water that we draw sits in the cracks and the crevices in the bedrock. There's no sand aquifer or gravel aquifer under Little Compton the way there is in other communities. As a result, when you drill a well into bedrock, it is a hit or miss proposition as to the number of gallons that you get, because if you happen to intersect large crevices and cracks, you'll get more water. If you intersect no crevices and cracks, you get no water. So depending upon where you drill, and there's no easy way to find out, although maybe divining rods work to a certain extent, you literally do not know how much water you're going to get until you drill the well. So as a result, in 1968, when the town implemented 2-acre zoning, one of the chief reasons the zoning went to 2 acres at that time was to protect the water resources of Little Compton because of this issue of bedrock and the amount of water that the bedrock holds, which is a poor water carrying substrate. So I fully understand the issue of affordable housing in town. fully understand the desirability of ADUs. And I would simply say, as the Conservation Commissioner, that we need to be careful with the number of homes that we will be building in areas that may have insufficient water, and it's difficult to tell what those areas are going to be. There are areas in town that have insufficient water now. There are other areas that have plenty of water. But it depends upon whether you hit the right crevices and the right cracks when you drill your well. Sorry, I can't be more definitive than that. My question for you, Mr. Solicitor, is along the lines that President Mushin has been talking about. If the town council were to vote to not allow ADUs in the short term, hopefully waiting for the state to either rectify its law, could we come back as a town and revisit the fact that we said no to ADUs in 6 months or a year or 2 years, and then say yes to ADUs under the current state law or under whatever law is enacted at that time?
Yes.
So this is not saying that we will never again allow ADUs. We're simply saying if the town council were to vote no, it could be for the time being, and we can either wait for the state to give us a better law, or we can say in 6 months or a year, you know what? We need ADUs. I guess we'll grin and bear it, and we'll accept what the state has either now or in the future.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions on the water?
Is there a motion?
I got a comment to say.
Let me close the public hearing then. Are you ready to do that? We'll close the public hearing on this particular facet of the law.
So I can tell you where these ADUs came from. They came about 30 or 32 years ago, where there was a gentleman down in Adamsville whose mother wasn't doing well. They didn't want to put her in a home. She was okay enough to live by herself. So that gentleman came to the town council. Jane Cat was the president at the time. And he asked the council, he had a barn, he asked the council if he could put an apartment above the barn so his mother didn't have to go into a home. And she couldn't be taken care of in the house because it was too small, they had kids in there. So that's where this came from. Now I have to say, there's a lot of brouhaha, in my feeling. We've got setbacks from septic systems, we've got setbacks for wells. There's only gonna be so much area that you can put one of these in. I think it's gonna do a disservice to the elderly in this town, the senior citizens that wanna stay in town, and they wanna live with their kids, and the kids can put an apartment above the garage, which a lot of people have garages in town. Well, the main thing, I've been fortunate enough to buy property in town, so my kids have land, so this isn't gonna affect me. But there's a lot of people that haven't been so lucky. There's all these kids moving around the town, they're struggling because they're trying to go to college, trying to do an apartment, live in an apartment, and they can't. They gotta come back home with a family, which creates another burden on the family. Because as we all know, everything's getting more expensive. Where if they have a garage and they can put an apartment over the garage for their children to come home to, I don't think that's gonna be a problem. And somebody said about the privilege. Well, I'll tell you about the privilege. That's the only people that's coming into Little Compton right now, are the privileged people. The people with a lot of money, they're buying along the coastline, they're putting up McMansions, 10 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms. Those are the people that we should have a problem with. We can't do anything about it. So I've always felt you got a piece of property, you should be able to do what you want with it within the reason of the law, or the letter of the law. So, as far as I'm concerned, if you want a motion, I'm gonna give a motion that we should approve this.
You're moving that we should approve.
Adopt the state regulation.
don't freeze it, what do you think's gonna happen when they move out?
Well, it's hard for me to say, because I'm not,
What could happen?
well, part of it has to do with economic forecasts. And I'm not so sure that I'm the appropriate person to say for that. If you adopt these provisions, any lot that you have over 20,000 square feet, it would be by right, so long as the criteria are met for an accessory dwelling unit that may or may not be in the dwelling unit. So you could see a separate unit constructed on the property, that would be by right, so long as it meets all the criteria for zoning, and we discussed water and septic and things of that nature. That's what you're looking at. If you're gonna do that, I would recommend, based on the comments tonight, that you consider an ordinance that would regulate accessory, short-term rentals, which.
I'll add that to my motion.
Okay.
Regulate, short-term rentals.
Just what you gotta do is direct me to come up with some language.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'll do it, but here's the thing. In response to Councilman Iriarty Moore, his question was none, you can regulate short-term rentals. But if I understood your question correctly, part of that regulation would be that short-term rentals would not be allowed in accessory dwelling units. Is that correct? I can present that ordinance. It's white knuckle time because I'm almost certain that you're gonna catch a lawsuit on that thing. But it'd be off to the races. So if you're going to go this route, I think that's what you need to do. I can get your language by your next meeting. I hope that answered the question.
Could you state your motion for the
I'd like to move that we approve the state's language for accessory dwelling units.
So that would amend
And-
section 14.
And can I put in, with, ordinance changes about
What?
short-term, why don't I just do this first, okay? If you want another motion, that I think we need to, regulate short-term rentals, I can. It should be in one motion, or it should be two? Bob wants me to put in the regulations about short-term rentals.
If I can make a suggestion.
Sure.
That the section 14-5.5 of your zoning ordinance would be amended to adopt the state's new regulations on accessory dwelling units, and direct the solicitor to present an ordinance that would regulate accessory dwelling units, to include that, to regulate short-term rentals, that would include a provision that they not be allowed in accessory dwelling units. And if I may, just for an advice purpose, the gentleman that came in said you should do this in the zoning ordinance. That would not be my recommendation. My recommendation would be to put it in the town code. And I'd like to proceed on that fashion, if the motion is adopted.
All right. Is there a second to the motion to adopt the state's language for for accessory dwelling units, and coincident with that, task the solicitor with developing a ordinance change which seeks to restrict short-term rentals? Is there a second to that motion?
You have a definition?
No, I don't get a second, there's no point for definition.
I'm happy to second your motion for discussion.
Does the motion include the language, presented to us by the planning board as well?
Yes. Yes.
So, if we vote for this and it passes, is this going to stay, our original ordinance here?
No.
That's gone.
Yes.
So it's gonna be the state ordinance.
That's correct, yes.
And you're gonna throw in the short-term language.
That will be in a separate ordinance, in the town code.
Separate chapter of the town ordinances.
Yeah, it's going to include the adequate water supply in wastewater treatment systems.
you believe this will be an issue for a lawsuit?
Just based on the experience in Providence and Narragansett and Newport, I'd say yes. Now, some of those communities have been successful, and some have not. Narragansett has not. So I'd expect that there'd be a lawsuit on it, yes. But that's gonna take.
Could you clarify what is before the town council? Like, what is the question you're being asked to vote on?
To amend section 14-5.5.
But is it in a specific way to amend it?
Yes.
Okay, so isn't that what you should be voting on, whether to agree to that specific amendment or not?
Correct.
What we're doing is that step and qualifying that step with it must be accompanied by additional language outside the zoning ordinance. The motion is to adopt state language and as a condition for that, also develop separate language to constrain the use of those units for short-term rental.
Right, but just seeing that what's before the town council is to either adopt the language that the planning board came up with or not. Right?
Correct. But there's a caveat.
Right.
So there can be a caveat?
The caveat is to adopt the language that the planning board has. They're also directing me to draft another ordinance to address a specific concern that was raised at this meeting.
But Tony, if you don't have to adopt this by January 1st, could you approve it, but approve it once you have successfully enacted an ordinance regulating B&Bs?
No. It's got to be on by January 1st. So that means that for the next December meeting, there has to be language proposed so that it can go to the first meeting in January. So you're looking at a 7-day gap.
The motion has been made.
Margaret, I think, wants to say something.
And seconded, is that correct? Yes.
Ooh, I just had a question for clarification. When was this law enacted? I thought it was already
That's correct, yes.
as of 2022.
Correct, yes.
January is an artificial deadline. Is there something we need to do by January, or we're just responding now?
We're responding now. You're correct. I still use the January 1st because of the other ordinances.
Is there any further discussion? Are you ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. The motion does not carry. Councilors Golembeski, McHugh, and I voted nay. Councilors Mataronis and Iriarte Moore voted aye.
A further motion is needed. That's to delete the existing provisions, section 14-5.5. That was the recommendation from the planning board.
Correct. I would entertain a motion to, following on to the planning board's recommendation, that we remove accessory uses, dwelling units, from the town ordinances in the manner that it was described for us by the planning board.
So move.
Can I just clarify that we're required to do this by state law because it's going to be in conflict with state law?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Is there a second to that motion?
I made the motion.
I'll second the motion. Is there further discussion?
You can put a condition on it and review it in 3 months, 6 months. We can bring it back anytime we want.
You can bring it back anytime you want.
Anytime.
You don't need a motion.
Right. What we need is action by the General Assembly. That's what we need.
Right. So, I mean, if we feel in 2 months, this is not a great idea, and things aren't going well, we bring it back and craft another ordinance, 405.
If the General Assembly doesn't amend the current statute that they have, if you wanted to revisit it, it would be with the language that they have. If the General Assembly changes the law, then you could consider those changes. Depends on what the General Assembly does.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. The motion carries 4-1 with Counselor Mataronis as the only no vote. Mr. Solicitor.
Well, I promise that the final ones won't take
That's a promise.
quite as much time. These are all pretty much technical amendments, and there's no leeway by the state on these things. The first one up is an amendment to section 14-9.1A. And this is for building official modifications. It's under enforcement. If the zoning relief needed in an application for setback and other relief of that nature is 15% or less, the building official is required to make a determination as to whether the modification is suitable. And there's criteria that's set forth in the statute. And basically, it tracks the current provisions for what you need to prove for a dimensional variance. In other words, your building official will be standing in the shoes of the zoning board. That's going to put more pressure on him. Now, if it's between 5% and 15%, assuming that Dean makes the determination that the application meets the requirements, he sends notice, which is paid for by the applicant, to the abutters within 200 feet. If no written objections are received within 14 days, he issues the permit. If there is a written objection, then it's referred to the zoning board for a regular hearing. If the zoning relief needed is 5% or less, no notice is sent to the abutting neighbors. Again, so long as it meets the criteria, he issues the building permit. That's what this provision is. Previously, there had been different percentages, and it wasn't mandatory. Now it's mandatory. So essentially what happens here is the zoning board will get slightly less applications. Your building official will be handling more matters on this. We'll work with him on the provisions on that and what he needs to do, but that is something that is not discretionary, and it's something that needs to be included in your ordinance.
We'll reopen the public hearing for this matter, 14-9.1. Is there public comment?
Just one point, Tony, and you mentioned notifying abutters within 200 feet. It does not say that in the subsection 2 there. It says all property owners abutting the property. So I would like it to be within 200 feet, and that would comport with other requirements under the zoning ordinance for petitioners for a variance or a special use permit. Could we do that?
It's not in the ordinance, but I do think it's acceptable. That's a good point. And if this is to be approved, which I recommend it does, with the amendment that 200 feet be the standard for the notification.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Is there a motion to adopt this language with the additional proviso of the...
With the amendment of the 200 feet, so moved.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next one is section 14-9.4. This is a technical change to the procedures of the zoning ordinance. Previously, a quorum for the zoning board was defined as 5 members being present. If 4 members were present, even though that was a quorum as would normally be defined, even 3, that did not constitute a quorum for purposes of the zoning board. That's been reduced down to 4 now. Secondly, in order for an application to be approved, 4 votes were needed for the approval. That has been reduced to 3. And I think the purpose for that was just to make it easier for applicants, and if the board couldn't get the 5 in there and only 4, the meeting still goes forward.
So is that 3 is being considered a majority vote then?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Uh,
Public hearing question.
Are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on the voting of the zoning board? Seeing none, the public hearing on that section is closed. Is there a motion to adopt this section?
Motion to
as
adopt.
described? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
And next is section 14-9.5, special use permit standards. And currently now, your special use permit has 4 standards that the zoning board exercises. What the state law proposes is that each special use permit have its own criteria. It's specific and objective criteria. Now, the purpose of zoning, in the reason you have zoning, it's based on nuisance law. That's the Euclid case from 1929, which I often talk to Mr. Holland about, but he's not here right now. I don't know where the objective criteria comes from. I honestly don't know how your 32 special use permits can have 32 different standards for this. What I've done here is divide your uses between residential and commercial, because that's what your zoning ordinance says. You have two use districts, and I've retained the same standards. Now, I've had comment from lawyers that had been involved in the drafting of this. They don't think that's acceptable. For the time being, I'm going to ask you to enact it. What I have said to the zoning board and the planning board is that we're in the process of reviewing each one of your special use permits, and we're going over the criteria. What we may have to do is propose to you in the very near future that some special use permits be made permitted uses, some special use permits be made not permitted uses, until somebody comes up with some type of standards that would be acceptable for this. Right now, it's a difficulty, and it's a difficult thing to do. I've discussed this with your zoning board and your planning board. I think they agree with me on it, that this is not a task that can be undertaken with your current use tables or any use table in the state. So I'm going to ask you to do it now, with the understanding that we'll be back to you shortly with some other proposals on this section.
Opening once again the public hearing. Is there any public comment on this section? Seeing none, is there a motion to, in accordance with the solicitor's recommendation, to adopt the proposed language?
So moved.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, this is the final one, section 14-9.6. And there are 3 changes here. There was a standard, there is a standard right now in your ordinance that the relief requested can't be for greater financial gain. I don't think that the zoning board down here ever struggled with that standard, but some other communities, it's been a big issue. The General Assembly decided to eliminate it. The next one is that the standard that the relief requested is the least relief necessary. That's also been eliminated. Again, that's not something that your zoning board ever struggled with, but I can tell you that there are other communities where it's created issues. The third and final one is that the hardship standard is further defined as the relief sought is minimal to a reasonable enjoyment of the permitted use to which the property is proposed to be devoted. And that's a good one, but it's what they have, and I don't think that your board's going to have difficulty interpreting that for applications that come before it.
Opening the public hearing an additional time. Is there any public comment on this section? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the changes specified by the solicitor to this section?
So moved.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. This completes the public hearing on the matters associated with changes to the zoning ordinance. We now move, and also acknowledges the comments from the planning board. We'll now move to amendments to the following additional chapters of the code, the first of those being police regulations, which is a change which proposes to include language regarding the use of cannabis in public. Opening the public hearing for that item, I would ask, is there any member who wishes to, any member of the community who wishes to speak on that? I would then, yeah.
I was here for the first public hearing you had on this, and again, I would like to object to your not handling smoking as a nuisance as the same way as you're handling cannabis, because of the trash at the beach and the nuisance that smoking at the beach and other public places are. And I would ask you that you amend your motion to deal with smoking as any type of smoking, whether it's cannabis or tobacco, particularly at the beach. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing in that respect, or on that chapter. Is there a motion?
Second.
The motion is made to approve the change to police regulations in the manner that it's presented as it's written. Is there discussion on that? We'll proceed with the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Councilor McHugh? Aye. Thank you. 4 voted in favor, 1 opposed. The next item is Chapter 4, Animal Control, to update control and licensing of dogs in town. And we acknowledge having received via email correspondence regarding the dog ordinance proposal, which the councilors have in their possession. We'll open the public hearing on the matter of amendment to Chapter 4, Animal Control. Yes, sir.
My name's Larry Anderson at 4 Winslow Road. This proposal to amend the animal control ordinance has a history that in recent years, this is the second stab that the police chief has been asked to develop a version of this. There was a previous version about lose track 4 years ago before COVID that sort of went on the back burner. So I've spoken to this before, and I do think I support this proposal because it gives the police a more concrete standard, I believe, to effectively enforce an ordinance that's accounts for current conditions. So that one of the problems with our existing ordinance is that some of the language is archaic, and in particular the animals at large, existing animals at large provision, which the police seem to have relied on for enforcement, is really an agricultural era ordinance that doesn't even mention dogs. It mentions agricultural animals and other animals. So I support this proposal. I especially appreciate that the chief has added a section about care of dogs, which again, the whole issue, all these issues, most dog owners are responsible and most dogs are well behaved, but the problem is that some owners are not responsible and some dogs are not. So that creates a tension because most people are responsible dog owners. But we've seen in other communities that there has been, some terrible circumstances of abuse. So I'm glad that's in there. A key element of this, of course, is raising the fines on violations of this ordinance. The one issue I'm sensitive to, although I support it as is
and your other comment you've received addresses this, is that we're proposing to require leashing of dogs. And this is a change. This is a change, but I do think, again, that it will take a while to be for the town to adjust to it. But again, I believe it gives the police, under current circumstances in our community, the way people interact with dogs, a number of dogs, this is would make the police's job easier and the public's situation clearer about their responsibility for dogs. However, and I'm somewhat reluctant to offer this, looking at 4-2.1A, the leashing of dogs provision, which, as I see this, is the new language. I have wondered whether there might be additional language added, and I'm going to read a proposal to you. If you're looking at 4-2.1A, let's say after the first sentence, which reads, no person being the owner or keeper of or having the charge or custody of any dog shall allow such dog to run loose off its owner or keeper's property within the town of Little Compton, unless such dog is properly leashed and said leash is controlled by the owner or keeper of such dog. I'm going to float this just as something to think about. At this point, I would propose either a comma or semicolon. I think a semicolon would work. That might read something like this, which could open up another can of worms, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Provided, however, that in areas specifically designated by the town, the state of Rhode Island, or nonprofit landowning organizations, and identified by appropriate signage, dogs under control by their owner or keeper be allowed off leash. That is, that there might be a mechanism that could be used in this law where certain areas in town that are designated and identified, so that both dog owners and non-dog owners would know that in those areas, people could let their dogs off a leash. So it would be a somewhat of a pressure valve, so that it wouldn't just be an abrupt total change that would put the police in the position and citizens of assuming that nowhere in town their dog could be taken off a leash. But that's a suggestion. Other than that, I urge you to adopt the ordinance that the chief has prepared. Thank you.
So, Larry, you're saying shall be leashed unless in designated areas approved for off leash? I'm trying to summarize it just.
Well, basically, I'm trying not, I'll be honest, I'm trying not to use the word dog parks.
Okay.
But that's what I'm suggesting, that, let's say, I mean, this, by suggesting a particular place, I'm going to open a can of worms. The example is Wilburwoods. So people use Wilburwoods and let their dogs off a leash. It's a publicly owned property. As far as I know, there haven't been problems. The problems we have are on private roads and other roadways. That's where the interactions have been. But say the town, that would be following the council's lap. Let's say the town designated Wilburwoods as an area where dogs could be let off a leash. You'd put a sign up, you put good signage up, so that both the dog owners and non-dog owners would know that this area, as opposed to other areas in town, is an area where dogs are off a leash, so dog owners can do that, and others are made aware that they may encounter dogs. So that, and let's say some of the conservation organizations have particular parcels where they might allow that. I don't exactly know where things stand at Simmons Mill Pond, but that would be another place where, if the state allowed that, then this ordinance the police wouldn't have to worry about it. It would be up to the organization to do it. So I don't know what the chief would think about this, but it is a suggestion to find a little bit of middle ground where public spaces that are identified, that are approved by the sponsors, the town, the state, or conservation organization, might permit people to let their dogs off of leashes.
Not speaking for the chief, but I don't think you have a problem with this because he'd have input on what spaces could actually, this could be allowed in.
Absolutely, I would be concerned about, mentions two public areas, Willow Woods and Simmons Mill. If you allow the dogs off leashes, quote unquote, in that area, you're now affecting people who might be wanting just to walk for the day but don't like dogs. So it would have to be somewhat of a semi-private area, and again, the word dog park comes to mind, that might be even fenced in to contain the animals, to let them play with each other, run, get some exercise, etc. But again, as Mr. Anderson said, it's a whole other can of worms. I'm not opposed to that theory, but it has to be kind of worked out, and I think more so than islands that we have here. I would just point out that, as far as I know, people are walking, but I can see the point that once you tighten up the rest of the town in a way, those places might come under additional use and pressure. I mean, that would be an issue, I suppose. But some of these places are being used now for people to take their dogs off a leash. So it's not as if it's not happening. So it's just a thought. And again, it could be, you could adopt this and consider it later with some other language, some kind of measure like that.
It might be as simple as a posted place, a place that is posted.
Well, that's, I don't like the idea of a fenced-in place, although there may be places where that would be appropriate. But again, if it's properly posted, and maybe the town would have to get into the nature of the posting, then that is a fair warning to all users that the environment you're entering is different from other places in town where you have to leash your dogs. So people use, I don't want to put all the pressure on Willow Woods, but dog users and non-dog users use that area now. I'm not sure that that's where problems are coming from, but there are some areas one can imagine where this might be possible. Thank you.
Larry, I think this is in areas where, there's houses and kids and everything like that, because I asked the chief, I walk my dog through Willows Woods, and you're correct, there's always 2 or 3 people in there with dogs, it's never a problem. So I think it's going to be up to the office's discretion to decide that. Now, if there's a dog fight down Willows Woods, which I've never seen in, I've been in town 70 years, so I've never seen it, then that would, it would be the officer in charge's discretion to deal with that.
I think that one concern would be that certain people who now, like yourself, if you keep doing that,
I'm breaking the law.
And hoping the police doesn't show up, then you're putting them on, then they have, there are people who will be discouraged then from using Wilbur Woods the way they are now. Certain dog owners now are not going to go there anymore.
Well, that'd be better for me.
Excuse me.
So maybe I shouldn't vote on this.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Emery Pinio, Long Highway. As I understand it, this has all got started because of one dog in one neighborhood, place where they have a homeowners association. They should handle the problem there if it's a small problem such as that. Meanwhile, I got poking around on the Rhode Island state laws, and on November 3rd, 2023, a bill was introduced into the legislature, 4-13.19, that has to do with vicious dogs, dogs attack, other people, liabilities, so on and so forth. The state is going to handle this problem, and I really hate to see the fact that my dogs, when I go to the beach, they can't get off the leash. They don't go anywhere near the beach. They just get in the pond and swim. Don't bother anybody at all. But if I have to have them on a leash, I can't let them go swimming. So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Andy Ryan, 40 Paget Brook Road. Thank you again for continuing to address this issue. And this isn't a problem with just one neighborhood. I mean, My neighborhood is the neighborhood the gentleman's talking about, and I'm the president of the homeowners association. I can promise you we can't do anything about it because it's a police matter, and we can't get the police to affect the change that we need in the current situation. Just 2 weeks ago, somebody was mauled by a dog in our neighborhood again. Same dog, same owner, same place, different person walking in the neighborhood. When I asked her, when I saw her, because we see her walking a lot, how she was doing, she showed me her arm, and it was black and blue all up and down her arm. And then I begged her to call the police and report it, and she said, why? They don't do anything. And I think that encapsulates a lot of the problem that we have, is that we've had a long-standing issue, and we have dog owners who have dogs that shouldn't be allowed to have dogs because they aren't good dog owners. And it's unfortunate, but we don't have the legal mechanisms in place, obviously, to deal with it, because the $25 fine is kind of a joke in our neighborhood because she just goes down and pays it several times a year. But that's not the only dog that's the problem. I was bit, my wife was bit by another dog. That dog had bitten several other people and harassed enough people where people stopped walking. Another neighborhood down the road that we also walk in also has a dog that has harassed people endlessly, until I called the police and explained to them the Rhode Island dog laws on the dispatcher, and told them what I was allowed to do to that dog if it harassed or threatened my kids again. So the police have not been effective at all with dealing with the dog issue. I'm concerned that this ordinance doesn't go far enough in the vicious dog category, because it gives discretion of that hearing. And there are plenty of examples. I was really interested in the solicitor's comment at the last public hearing, when he mentioned that there's the new public hearing that you don't have to go to court, that this has been used. But we've had several incidents in our neighborhood where a dog basically killed another dog. And I don't know any hearing that has happened where we've had in the last, say, year or two for our neighborhood. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would ask that you amend your proposed ordinance to require the police to investigate any report of a vicious dog. Don't leave it up to their discretion, because I have been living with their discretion for 6 or 8 years. I couldn't get them I asked them, I went down to the police department and asked the officer to process a vicious dog, a dangerous dog action against the dog owner that bit out us, because that dog had bit other people. And they were too busy, right? On the phone when I called, they were, they usually don't come down to our neighborhood for dog bites because they're too busy. So I wouldn't give them discretion when a dog bites someone or another dog. I would mandate a hearing with an outside body to try to get that vicious, because the vicious dog statute that the chief put in is very useful, because that is that $100,000 worth of liability insurance is the stick that's going to be required to get a person who owns a dog who thinks it's a joke to pay a $25 fine every time her dog bites someone, which is where we're at now. And it's very unfortunate, but it's really what you've seen over the last several years as this has repeatedly occurred. This is because the police haven't done anything to deal with this issue, right? And I'm glad that you have an ordinance now, and it's many years too late, but I would really appreciate if you make those motions. I agree with Larry Anderson that there should be places in town, the beach, out of season, Simmons Pond, Wilbur Woods, other places where people can go run their dogs and not feel like they're violating the law, because a lot of people will read the statute and follow the statute no matter what their discretion might be. And you should give people a place to be able to take their dogs off leash if they're noticed. I think that's a great idea. You can decide where those places are later. You don't need to decide those now. But I think allowing that, especially the beach and other places where it's common to see dogs, is great. I just think you need some real stiff language in there to make people who are not good dog owners, to really not allow them to have dogs if they're repeatedly bad dog owners, or at least to make the cost of owning a dog so expensive, right? Their homeowners insurance and their other insurance, they probably are not, they're going to change their behavior. Because I think there's plenty of examples in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods where we have a serious problem that has yet to been addressed. Thank you.
Sheila McIntosh, Wardell Lane. I don't know what percentage of dogs in town actually get licensed. You might have a better idea, and they have to have a rabies license in order to get registered, which can be a little tricky because you have to do that in April and your dog doesn't get revaccinated until June or August or something. Years ago, there was a rabies clinic in town, right out here. It was a good thing. Those dogs could be licensed at the same time they got their rabies shot, and I recommend that we do that again. Thank you.
Any other public comment? We'll close the public hearing on chapter 4 and entertain a motion to adopt or amend the proposed.
I'll move we adopt it as written.
The motion is made and seconded to adopt this ordinance as written.
Question for the police chief. Chief Raines, do you envision going to South Shore Beach and giving someone a ticket for the dog off leash? I don't envision myself doing that, so you don't get called to the beach for this, but I envision there being some issues at the beach, as there always are, and in different parts of the neighborhood. And again, I've said this at all the public meetings, is that we are going to take each and every individual story, look at it, compare it to the ordinance, and use our discretion. All right, so let me rephrase it. Someone calls you and says, look at those dogs in the pond swimming. Are you going to go down there and give them a ticket? I know you're going to use your discretion. We're going to use our discretion. I can't give you a 100% answer whether we're going to do that or not. So, fine. How many times has so-and-so's dog been off the leash? Do we have a record of that dog being off the leash 30 times, or is this the first time it's ever happened? I mean, is so-and-so aware of the ordinance and the changes in the ordinance? These are all the things that have to factor in to the ultimate issuance of a ticket or not. So I see this new ordinance for people who abuse their dogs off leash and are aggressive to people and kids. I don't see this as you should worry about your dog swimming at South Shore Beach. I don't see this ordinance worrying about walking your dog in the pond, unless, like you said, 4 people have already called you about someone's dog. So I don't think, and I hope it gets out there that, this is for people that are abusing, the ordinance and abusing other people with their dog. So I don't think it's a big deal. I can tell you that there will certainly be an educational period associated with all of this. Our calls for service, animals at large calls, will make people aware of the new ordinance well before any fines are passed. I guarantee that.
Further
Motion on the table.
discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. There is one more public hearing, and that is to confirm the change proposed to Chapter 5, which increases parking fees. If you recall, this is in response to the perception that we have parking fees that are more like the cost of admission, and therefore people are willing to pay them in order to get a parking spot.
Second.
Is there any public comment?
Get ahead of the curve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This completes the public hearing portion of the agenda. We'll move forward with the other matters before us. The community center has asked us to pass along that on December 9th, there's an Army-Navy game watch party at 3 p.m. at the community center. On December 20th, there's a UCC outreach sponsored senior lunch. There are senior haircuts every Tuesday. There's a Boomer movie on Wednesday, December 27th. There's a senior game and card day every Monday. And there's computer help for seniors every Wednesday. In addition, the after-school registration is a rolling registration. Inquire at the community center, and the Circle of Friends meet on December 16th. Inquire at the community center for details. Are there any other announcements? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting on November 16th.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have before us department head reports by the clerk, police chief, fire chief, finance director, and assessor.
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Those will all be placed on file. Next item is old business, an update from the administrator regarding the process of a needs assessment for seniors. You have a description in your packet that he provided in the form of a memo, I believe. No, that's not correct. Sorry. Excuse me. I misspoke.
Dear councilors, last Friday, President Mushin, myself, and Linda Packman has volunteered someone who has a wide range of experience, a retired nurse, and she has quite a bit of experience on the elderly field, and so she has volunteered to assist us with beginning the creation of a scope of work that to be done, and identified consultants. We have identified 2 consultants thus far, Mr. Madison that I mentioned to you last time, John Madison, and we also identified Caitlin, and the last name I'll try my best, Frumiere, I believe that's the last name. So at this point, we are meeting again tomorrow to complete the scope of work, and also requested the resume from Mr. Madison. We do have one from Ms. Fromier, but not for the thing. So we intend to have more affirmative information for your next council meeting.
Thank you.
I just ask a question. You referred to a meeting with Mr. Mushin,
Linda Packerman, and Amy, I'm sorry, I forgot Amy and myself. There was 4 of us.
No other council member there, correct?
No.
I'd like to be involved in that.
Okay.
I was supposed to be there.
I'm sorry, yes, that is correct. That was my fault. The time changed. We were supposed to, we had initially set for 2, then it was moved to 11 o'clock, and yes.
I am.
Okay.
I am fine with the 2 of you being the council representatives if you wish.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is an update and request for authorized payments received from the Little Compton Housing Trust regarding 184 Colebrook Road project and the 151 Old Harbor Road project. In this case, there is a memorandum in your packet that you can refer to. Mr.
There is, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak here this evening. I won't belabor the point. Housing Trust has been busy in the last year or so. The 2 projects in particular on which we're focused, 184 Colebrook Road, in which the Housing Trust has entered into a purchase and sale agreement with Rhode Island Housing. Housing Trust has performed water testing, wetlands determination, survey work, is in the process of a wetlands application to DEM for the demolition and rebuilding of the existing structure. We anticipate completion of due diligence and purchase of the property by February 1st of 2024, and that funding would come from the Little Compton Affordable Housing Fund that has been set up. We will be requesting a payment of services for the survey and wetlands application within the next month. At closing, we will request funds for the acquisition and closing costs, including legal, title, and insurance. The second project that we've been working on is located at 151 Old Harbor Road. Trust has been involved in working toward the acquisition of 4.9 acres We have proposed 4 single-family homes on that property. The Housing Trust has applied for and received a grant from Rhode Island Housing in the amount of $200,000 to purchase that property. An additional $110,000 plus has been acquired for pre-development costs. At this point, at the Housing Trust last meeting, a request was made for a $2,500 deposit as a retainer for Able Engineering as part of the trust due diligence for this property at Old Harbor Road. As of yet, we have not received, or that check has not been written. So I'm here tonight to request that. Additionally, another $2,500 retainer for Union Studios architecture firm to initiate the architectural design process for that property. There has been a bit of an issue with regard to availability of funds for the Housing Trust. And as many of you are aware, in 2018, many members of this council voted to approve a certain percentage of building permit fees be allocated toward the Affordable Housing Trust here in town. As of today, I think the amount in that account is around $280,000. I don't know what you can do with $280,000 property-wise in this town, but we're trying. It's kind of a big rock up a steep hill. So I certainly would ask for the support of this council toward the ends of affordable housing. I would like to acknowledge and thank Dennis Talbot and members of the Ag Trust for their efforts in this particular piece of property at 151 Old Harbor Road, and I look forward to the success of that. I also look forward to the input of the town-wide, because it's extremely important, as has been said before, that everything done by the Housing Trust be transparent. And so I would encourage anyone listening to take part in Housing Trust meetings, that being the second Monday, it's been changed to Monday, second Monday of each month here in the Commons. I will make myself available to any questions that council may have.
Yeah, you've done what you need to do now to request these funds, and they haven't been paid. You're correct, the 2,500 and the 2,500. So those are on our agenda for approval tonight. Your question regarding waiving the financial town meeting to proceed with the acquisition of property at 151 Old Harbor Road, I don't have any issue in principle with that request, except to say that 4 houses on 4.9 acres isn't permitted by zoning, so there needs to be some action taken, I think, to qualify the acquisition.
If I may,
Yeah.
So with deeded affordable houses, I think that in fact they would be allowed, and certainly they will be allowed after January 1st of 2024.
Okay.
And I respectfully would make that statement. So I would also respectfully add that if this town is in fact interested in affordable housing, as the state law requires, and this town being the last on the list when it comes to that, that we all need to do more toward that end.
Right.
And again, the Housing Trust looks forward to the cooperation of the council, public and private entities who are willing to work toward that same end.
Is there, do you have, if we were to approve tonight the payment of $5,000 for those 2 retainer fees, is there a problem with our, I'm doing this in the interest of the
Time, I get it, absolutely, yeah.
Is there, do you have an issue with us bringing you back the answer to your question about waiving? And I'm familiar with the article, that the financial town meeting, but I'd like to avoid getting into an extended discussion regarding.
I agree,
the
absolutely.
suitability of that.
Long meeting tonight. Housing's
We
been
are
on the
able to
agenda
do that
already.
at the first meeting in January, does that inhibit what you're trying to do?
Well, it doesn't move it along as quickly as some of us might like, but I would defer to your judgment.
Okay, I'm interested in others. Yeah.
To answer your first question, when they get ready to go, they have to file what's known as a comprehensive permit application for what they want to do. It's going to be an affordable housing project.
Right.
That puts it onto a different track. They need to do that. That's the first thing. For the first two requests, they're in order and appropriate to approve tonight because those are for preliminary costs. The third request about the financial town meeting, I'm looking at section 2-9.2 of your ordinance, and it allows the housing trust shall have the authority to receive real estate by any manner, including grant, gift, bequest, or purchase, which would cover this. So I'd ask you to defer on number 3 until that can be clarified. I don't think that's going to slow down the project at all.
When will that be clarified? Next meeting?
Get you for the next meeting.
You just clarify for me, so the housing trust can't access their funds. They have to come here for us to approve to access their funds. They wanna buy pencils, they gotta come here.
Well, here's the thing. I'm wondering why their money is in, and I've already discussed this with Mr. Bowen. I don't know why they're here in the town. I think it's for convenience purposes. But your ordinance establishes them as a nonprofit corporation. So I think it's appropriate for them to have their own accounts so that they can access these funds without coming here. And quite frankly, I'm concerned about liability for the town. You're going to approve this. If the funds aren't used properly, you might have some liability in that, even though you didn't spend the funds at all.
So what do they need to do to get their own checkbook and get their funds?
I think they need to create it. They have the legal authority to do so. It's a corporation, it's a nonprofit corporation in good standing.
So are they gonna be able to do that in time without slowing the project down? We don't have to vote on anything here.
The ordinance which created the housing trust, I think, could certainly be improved. Over my course of time on the housing trust, I've had a lot of questions about exactly what the housing trust is and how it fits into the rest of the town's agencies. There is a great deal of leeway that is given to the housing trust, as the attorney suggested, in terms of acquiring and holding property. But until very recently, there's not been any funding, nor has there been much interest, quite frankly.
The way that the ordinance was created was to say the state requires us to charge this amount for building permits. We choose to move a portion of each one over some threshold into a fund whose purpose ultimately will be for affordable housing. What we didn't say, because they didn't have the ability to receive at that point, we didn't say just ship the money over to them and now we're done and we don't have to get into this at all. That's why it's where it is right now. And his request is certainly appropriate. And there's no reason for us not to approve, in my estimation, those two payments, subject to the solicitor's concern that if they were scoundrels and did something with it. But as to the financial town meeting, let's just.
I'm not talking about that.
Yeah, okay.
So do we need to amend the ordinance, the housing trust ordinance, for them to access their money?
No, I've already done a memo on this, and I'll expand on it. That's why I'm saying it's in order on 1 and 2 for their requests, and I think it's okay. 3, I wouldn't. And I'm not so sure that this is a poorly drafted ordinance because it mentions advising, but it also gives the housing trust the ability to acquire property on this. Right. The only issue that has to be resolved is what happens with this money that's coming from the building permits. And I think that that's something that we can spend a little time on, not a lot, to figure it out. But this is a separate entity. It's a nonprofit corporation. But for tonight, 1 and 2, that's in order.
It's a 501?
I don't know. Did you do 501?
Domestic nonprofit corporation.
Okay.
Right. Then there is a motion.
Well, it's part of the bills, right?
No.
We have to do a separate vote.
Right, it's described.
So we can do it now, or we could do it with.
I'll make a motion to fund the housing trust $5,000.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on that. Yes, sir.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but so the housing trust was created by ordinance. in what, 2000 and, whatever the order. Excuse me? 2006. At that same time, and I was the chair, I think it was the chair of the Charter Review Commission at that time, the charter, and I've looked at I can dig out, I've got the paperwork. The council added language to the charter provision for the housing trust that at that time called for notwithstanding the language you're reading, called for the trust to be subject to the section 103 of the charter, which requires town meeting vote for the acquisition of town property. So you had an ordinance that said one thing and a charter that said another thing. At this last at the last charter review, the current language of the charter that was adopted, that doesn't use the word waiver, it just says shall not be subject to section 103. That's one thing. So you've had a requirement that's not consistent with the ordinance. With regard to the availability of the funds that were created, in 2018, the council adopted this provision by ordinance to allocate money into a fund. In that ordinance, which is not even a numbered ordinance, it's a footnote under the table, it says subject, the expenditures of that will be subject to the approval of the town meeting, financial town meeting. The boilerplate language in the warrant for a number of years called for, I can't remember the exact language, called for the town meeting to approve those expenditures. 2 years ago, Andrew made the motion to amend that, to remove the requirement that the town council approve the funds. So the trust for a year had access to the funds. Last year, for whatever reason, that language was omitted. And now the provision for allowing the trust access to funds does not exist at this moment. So it's a confusing issue, but and the other issue I have a question about is the council's authority by ordinance to authorize any board to create a separate Rhode Island corporation. If they can do that for that, why can't they do it for any purpose?
They actually could, and I'm looking at the charter, and it says that it's not subject to section 103.
That was just changed last year. Okay. So otherwise, according to the charter, this discussion will be taking place at financial town meeting.
Yes.
So I'm just describing this is a new procedure. This is the first time that the council said this.
Understood. There's no conflict between the charter and the ordinance.
At this point.
Correct, yes.
But there had been until last year.
And I will let you did exercise that new part of the ordinance that would require the culvert property. We didn't go to town meeting to require that.
Yeah, so that was good. Although the voters did have a chance to vote on the funds of that. Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next item of business is a memorandum from Angela Denham identifying December 12th as the date for the senior Christmas party and requests funding for food and supplies. We have a line item for this in the budget, and it is well capable of the $400 request. Is that your understanding, Counselor? Madam?
Yes, she called me up and wanted to know if she could have a Christmas party, whether there was money in the seniors account to fund it. And after speaking with President Mushin, he said there was, so I asked him to put this in there. An amount up to $400 could be spent on food for the seniors' Christmas party.
Would that be your motion?
That would be my motion.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded to invest up to $400 for the senior Christmas party. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Don't forget the 12th.
Don't forget those of you who are a senior. Ratify the action of the town clerk and the finance director to submit for the renewal of the town's transfer station license prior to its expiration and to confirm the expense of $3,000 renewal fee as submitted with said application.
Motion to ratify.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to ratify the action and confirm the expense. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next is new business, a request from the police chief to purchase 3 Motorola Apex 6000 portable radios to be utilized by patrolmen.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Second, to consider setting December 8th as the date, that would be tomorrow, as the date by which final budget requests from appointed town officials, boards, committees, and agencies under the jurisdiction of the town council are due to the administrator per Charter Section 503.
Motion to set the date.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there discussion? All in favor? Aye. The next is to consider recommending to the Budget Committee the FY25 compensation for the town clerk. This is so that planning of individual budgets can be conducted prior to that. I would, go ahead. I would propose that we recommend to the Budget Committee a salary of $70,000 for fiscal '24 for the town clerk.
Second.
That wasn't a motion, but it can be if you wish.
I'll move it if he wants to second it.
Fine, I will move that number. That's a second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next is to consider appointment of 1 or 2 candidates to the Little Compton Police Department. From interviews that were conducted, I think, the day before yesterday, but I'm not, no, they were actually conducted earlier this evening. Sorry.
Motion to approve Taylor, what was it? Taylor Ann Malone and Ryan Aruda.
Second.
To be candidates for Police Academy.
And could it be subject to satisfying
Satisfying all,
prerequisites?
right.
The motion then is to offer letters of employment to the 2 candidates so named, and to make that offer contingent upon satisfying all normal prerequisites that we specify in such letters. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next is a hazard mitigation plan update, overview of project, and designation of an advisory committee to oversee the update process. You have in your packet a description provided by the chair of the hazard mitigation plan update project, which would be the fire chief. And he can answer any questions you might have. The people that are named there give us the requisite spread of town staff, 6 members of the town staff, and 6 members of the public / stakeholders, including the person who helped us with crafting of the language. Is that correct?
Right. The only change, I don't see the names in front of you, but Abigail Brooks will be added to that to take place.
Elaine Bristol has asked not to participate. And Abigail Brooks has.
Thank you, Abigail. Late breaking change to what you have in your packet, and I'm grateful for the correction. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have that requisite list that you see before you. And the question before us is to designate that committee and ask any questions you may have. I would entertain a motion to. The motion is made and seconded to appoint the 12 members as cited on the memorandum before you. Is there any further discussion?
Chief, could you please keep in the back of your head Secana Point Road where the launch and ramp is. I know it's a state road, but we need to get them to come down and raise that road somehow because the climate change is real and that harbor is rising, as you know. You're down there all the time. So on hard northerly winds and real high tides, there's seaweed on the road. So the water's already reached that. So just keep that in the back of your head. Yes, sir. Bring it out. Thank you. Thank you, Abby.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. The next item is to consider approval of the town administrator's recommendation to develop an on-site wastewater management plan. Specifically, what this does is, with the adoption of such a plan, gives homeowners the authority and the access to low-interest loans to upgrade septic systems.
Motion to approve.
Discussion. Sure.
Just very briefly, you've sort of captured that very nicely. Back to January 19 of 2023, we had a presentation made by the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. They were here before us. And in order for the residents to qualify for the loan program, we would have to have an on-site wastewater management, correct? Yes, plan. And that's so. Mike Steers, Don, myself, and Bob, we actually and we consulted with gentleman Jim Riaz to assist us, procuring a grant at the time to write the plan. Unfortunately, we put it together. We were not accepted for that particular grant. So we had to regroup, and we thought that this is the time, and specifically now with all the changes that are coming down, the proposed changes, more than ever, it's important that we pursue this and go forward to have a plan drafted.
So you're going to go out for an RFP to somebody to write this plan? Or these people right here are going to do it?
We have this gentleman already put forth. He's the one that actually was he's the one that assisted us with pursuing a grant, which was not successful, but he's willing to step forward and write that plan for us.
Okay, as I mentioned when this came up before, there was some people that kind of felt a little overzealous on this, and what I stated was, I don't want people walking into everybody's backyard saying, oh, I think that needs to be replaced, I think that needs to be replaced, okay? If there's an old igloo, which is the one made out of bricks, is working satisfactorily, I don't want somebody to say, oh, that's gotta be taken out, you gotta spend 40 grand on a new one. If something's working satisfactory, leave it alone. People in this town don't have the kind of money to come up with $40,000 or $50,000 for a new septic system in, and that's what they cost these days. So, of course, this is only a plan, so as this approaches and gets farther along down the road, I just don't want anybody saying, okay, well, this gives us the right to go in people's backyard and check the septic systems out. If there's a problem, that's a different thing, okay? Thank you.
Well, we've had actually folks approaching us to
Right.
say, when is this going to come through for us to be able to apply? So and I don't foresee that. I'll let Don, speak to that a little bit more because he's been much more involved than I. But that was not the intent, was to go around into people's, yards and say,
We
hey.
don't want to go down the road that Tiverton went and mandated it, and we want to stay away from that.
Well, I think, we discussed back in January, looking at the different on-site wastewater management plans around the state. There are some communities that go the more like enforcement route, like they do in Tiverton. And then there are others that their plan has been approved by DEM, but they're more education focused. They're not going and looking at the, they're not going around and checking everyone's septic tank or whatever. So I think that there's some leeway here for us to be able to get a good plan that's acceptable for everyone and that allows people to get these loans to fix build septic systems or systems.
When it says voluntary homeowner inspections, I'm on board with that. They say, well, I'm having a problem, I'm gonna come for a loan. So I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just saying I don't want people to be overzealous.
There are going to be two aspects to the plan that we collectively have to decide upon in the drafting of the plan. The first is the method by which to encourage and ensure regular maintenance. So our residents will only have access to the community loan program if the plan is approved by DEM. So we have to get the plan approved by DEM to get access to the low interest 0% loan program. And DEM is getting, unfortunately, more stringent about the programs or the plans that it is approving. So it used to be that simply having an education program would likely be enough to get the plan approved by DEM. DEM has made some noise that it requires more than just a public relations brochure speaking to the need or the decency of upgrading your septic. So we'll have to see what actually can get approved by DEM. We don't have to do this, so we can go through the drafting process and decide that the plan that DEM will accept is too onerous, and therefore we decide not to go forward and have our residents available for the low interest program. The second thing that will have to happen is a public hearing. So after we draft the plan, there will be a public hearing. And then the last thing is that we do have to designate an official of the town to administer the program. So we'll have to figure out who that is. So those are the three things that'll have to happen. Okay?
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're also going to use $25,000 of our office funds to draft this.
Right.
And we may not use it, depending on how stringent the DEM is. So I just want to reiterate that we need to use our office funds appropriately, and this is something you can use your office funds appropriately with.
Right.
Wastewater and sewage. And as you know, my feelings are we haven't used our office funds appropriately in contention with the final rule. But that's another story for another day. I've already spoke on that, you know how I feel about that. But this one is appropriate, I just want to make that clear. I'm just hearing now that we may lose $25,000 if we feel the DEM is too stringent.
I'd also like to believe that if for some reason we can't get it through DEM, maybe we can work with the supplier and maybe not pay $25,000. That would certainly be my goal.
Should it be less than the amount than 25,000?
Sorry? Taking the vote.
Should we make a different amount for 25,000?
No, that's, they would have said 2 years ago it was 20,000, now it's 25. I don't think there's much leeway there, Patrick, unfortunately.
I would certainly second the motion that or second the opinion that it is an appropriate expenditure of ARPA funds. I would agree with you. Are you ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks for the work on that, and all the best as we try to make it happen. The next item is to consider approval of a solicitation for administrative services in support of the Community Development Block Grant applications. You have in your packet a memorandum from the administrator describing this. Basically, our Church Community Housing Corporation agreement has come to an end, and he is proposing the attached RFP to give authorization to advertise for a Community Development Block Grant Administrative Service Provider.
So is this the one that we always used to get where Steve Ott, the guy used to
Yes.
come down and some other people?
Yes, but there has not been for communities such as ours, any community.
We never really got any money anyways.
No, I mean, there have been no grants available to us, right? And there may not be, still, I don't know that, but we will need someone to be our admin services provider.
At what cost would that be?
It depends on the grant, you know. There will be a administrative service on the amount, there is a percentage from the grant that would be applied. So it doesn't cost anything to us, you know. It will only be what do you call it, compensated if engaged in a grant, you know, writing a
So we
grant.
don't front any money to the winning bid. Yeah.
But she did apply.
Motion to go out with the
Hang
RFP.
on, I have a question.
Okay.
And if I may, my name is Bob Plain, I'm the CDBG Program Manager for Church Community.
Thank you, Bob.
And there's no cost to Little Compton in any event, right? So for our admin services, CDBG is a reimbursement program, and you have to put that money up if and when Little Compton ever decides to engage in the CDBG activity, but then Little Compton gets reimbursed. So all the communities in Newport County that contract with us, they all pay us, and then CDBG pays them back. So if Little Compton wants to continue working with Church Community Housing, which you have since 1988, and you know what I like to tell communities, even the communities that don't utilize CDBG every year or very often as Little Compton does, we're like the can opener on your Swiss Army knife. You don't use us all the time, but when you're camping and you need to open a can, you're really glad that we're there for you. So it's free to Little Compton, it's free to the Little Compton taxpayers. And, you know, if the Housing Trust needed money for a project they're doing, that's something we can help them access money for, and it won't cost you guys a nickel.
I'm ready to turn over this seat to you, sir.
I'm ready to thank that guy for staying this long. He's probably gonna drive back to Newport.
And he's still awake.
Generally, our meetings are done by 8:30, so wherever you're coming from, if you're going back to Newport, good luck on the drive.
Motion to approve the RFP.
It's okay, Bob only follows me, you know. I saw him last night in Bristol today.
Is there a second?
Second.
I was gonna crash on your couch.
The motion is made and seconded with enthusiastic support from the audience for the approval of the solicitation. Is there discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. A request from the Little Compton Village Improvement Society for the council to recommend to the Budget Committee on its behalf a stroke in the amount of $10,000 for repair and maintenance of the Brownell House.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Abatement list submitted by the tax assessor.
I'm gonna step back from this. I got a conflict.
The motion is made to approve the abatement list. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. There's are you ready to vote? All in favor, with the exception of the gentleman who has exempted himself. The motion carries 4-0. Application for a mobile food establishment license for Hawaiian Jim Shave Ice. This license will be the 7th license if issued. Our limit in the ordinance, and it calls for us to have the authority to change it, is less than 7, it's 5. So I would entertain a motion to raise the limit of our allowable mobile food establishment licenses to 7.
So moved.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
With that 7th vacancy, I would entertain a motion to award Hawaiian Jim Shave Ice and Company this license, subject to all conditions that are necessary for such.
So moved.
Just a discussion, I don't know Hawaiian Shave Ice.
Right.
But at the beach, he's at the beach. And I know, so he's been branded before.
Yeah.
It comes to the 4th of July.
But meanwhile, somebody else took license number 6, so he's now number 7.
I just looked at, they're not from Little Compton, and I don't want.
Right. And that's the reason when we first crafted the mobile food establishment license process, we said, let's limit it to 5, because what we don't want is everybody to leave Warwick on the day that they have their massive gathering and send all those food trucks down here to Little Compton. Not that that threat was perhaps reasonable, but we left it there, but we left in it the ability to do what we just did, which is to change the number. And your point's well taken. We want to make sure that it's not putting somebody else out of business.
So there's no conflict with the vendor that's down there now?
No.
Okay.
Did I get, no.
I'll give
All
a
in
second.
favor? All in favor of awarding that license?
Aye.
Any opposed? A letter of inquiry to preserve Rhode Island for grant funds to repairs of meeting hall at 32 Commons. I'm indebted to Carter Wilkie, who brought this to us. I filled out the online form and have submitted it. I'm showing it to you. What the form does, it's called an inquiry. It says we are interested in obtaining funds for the exterior refurbishment of the meeting hall at 32 Commons. And it would cover the things that I indicated there. It puts our ore in the water. It has some pictures with it. If they agree with us, they will come back to us and say, we'd like you to submit a proposal.
Do you want a ratification of doing this?
I would like you to ratify.
Motion to ratify,
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to ratify
Council
the submission
President's
of a letter of inquiry. Is there any further discussion?
submission.
All in favor? Any opposed? The consent file.
Motion to place consent file on, consent calendar on file unless anybody wants to pull anything for discussion.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
And the payment of bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Motion made and seconded to pay the bills as detailed. All in favor?
Aye.
There being no further business before this council, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, Chief, maybe you can have that guy follow you back to Jamestown. Huh?